right. Good day, everybody. Okay. Jai Jai Prabhupada, Paramahansa Paravacharya, Vajradana Pavarana Prabhupada ki jai. Ananda Gauri Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Jai. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyacha Deshatarni. So you were on the 10th canto here, very sophisticated. So we're reading from the 10th canto, 17th chapter, text 12. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tat Kaliya Param Veda Nanya Kaschana Deliha Avastid Sin Gurudad Vita Krishnena Cha Vivasataha Tat Kaliya Param Veda Nanya Kaschana Leliha Avatsid Gurudad Vita Krishnena Cha Vivasataha Tat Kaliya Param Veda Nanya Kaschana Leliha Vatsid Gurudad Vita Krishnena Cha Vivasataha Tat Kaliya Param Veda Nanya Kaschana Leliha Vatsid Gurudad Vita Krishnena Cha Vivasataha
Tatkaliya param veda Nyakasana leliha Vatsi Gurudad Vita Krishnena cha vivasataha Tatkaliya param veda Kaschana leliha Krishna
Okay. Tam. That's. Kaliha. Kaliya. Param. Only. Veda. New. Na. Not. Anya. Other. Kasyana. Any. Liliha. Serpent. Avasit. He dwelt. Garudat. Of Garuda. Vitaha. Afraid. Krishnena. By Krishna. Cha. And. Vivasitaha. Expelled. Translation. Of all the serpents, only Kaliya came to know of this affair, and in fear of Garuda, he took up residence in that Yamuna lake. Later, Lord Krishna drove him out. So to repeat, of all the serpents, only Kaliya came to know of this affair. And in fear of Garuda, he took up residence in that Yamuna lake. Later, Lord Krishna drove him out. So there's no purport to this. So actually, we can comment on this first. So Om Gana Timranda Shah Gavanjana Shlakaya Chakshu Unmiritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So what is being referred to here is the curse that Garuda had by this great sage named Shobhari Muni. Shobhari Muni was a great sage who was meditating in the Yamuna River. And he was, of course, at the same time, even though he was a great sage, very detached. He didn't even have to breathe. That's how great he was. Can you imagine that? He's under the water. He didn't need what they call nowadays an aqualung. Everyone knows what an aqualung is, scuba gear. He didn't need scuba gear. He didn't need gills like fish have, but he was able to control his breath. So one may say, wow, that's pretty amazing. But Prabhupada said that frogs also have the same ability. Did you know that? You may not know that. Because you don't know that because it's not in Fiji, the frogs don't have that ability. They're Fiji frogs. But in other countries where the water freezes up, the frogs go underwater for the whole winter and they stay in the mud. And even though they don't have gills, little tadpoles have gills. You know what a tadpole is? Tadpole is like a baby frog, little things. They look like fish, little tiny fish. You have them here in Beijing? So later on, they grow to be frogs, and then they can't breathe underwater anymore because the frog has to come up all the time for air. But when the frog is in the winter, goes and stays for the whole winter without breathing. It's amazing, isn't it? And then when the spring comes, the frog comes out again, gets married, and has little tadpole children. And has millions. Actually, the frog wife, wife or female frog. I don't know if they get married, but anyway, she gives birth to actually hundreds of little tadpoles coming out from the eggs. It's interesting. Frogs. So Prabhupada said the frogs have some mystic power too. So having these mystic powers is not really that impressive. I mean, even human beings, all human beings have mystic powers. Prabhupada gave the example of nails. The nails keep growing out. It's like a mystic power. Of course, it doesn't help us that much. But, we have different mystic powers. It's a strength. They can do many things, amazing things. So here is the Shobri Muni with mystic powers meditating in the Yamuna River. And even though he was such a high level, this is also an interesting point, he was at a very high level of spiritual advancement, still he became sentimental. It's interesting. It's almost like Bart Maharaj, even though he's on the platform of Baba. You know that story? Bart Maharaj, he got sentimental with the deer. And because of that little baby deer, he began to protect the little baby deer. And as a result of that, he took birth as baby deer. So Shobri Muni was actually like that too. He was very attached to his fish friends. It's like many devotees, they have fish tanks in their house. And many devotees have pets and dogs and cats, not here in Fiji anymore. Dogs are outside, they keep you awake all night long. I heard that Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Maharaj complained about the dogs, right? They're always barking. But in the West, we keep the dogs inside and we take them to bed with us. It sounds funny, but they do that. My brother used to kiss his dog. Muchi. People don't understand the principle of Muchi. So Shobri Muni, he was with his fish friends. And Garuda, he's not vegetarian, even though he's a devotee. Someone may say, how can a devotee not be vegetarian? Well, according to the body one has, one can eat certain things. There's certain things allotted to them. Just like we have this verse in the Upanishad, Ishavasha Vidam Sarvam Yatkinja Jigajam Jagat. Tena Jigdena Bunjadat Kumarkritat Svitanam. Everyone has a quota. Krishna owns everything, but everybody has a quota. So your quota is Patram Pushpam Pulam Toyam Yami Bhakta Priya. Your quota is leaf of fruit, water, some nice things like that. Your quota is not meat, and your body is not even meant to eat meat. If you examine physiologically, you see the intestines, the lower intestines are much too long. That's why so many people have cancer of the intestines. I don't know if they have that here, Fiji, but it's a very common disease. And because it's so common, the doctors prescribe that every year you have to have this big tube shoved up you to see if there's any cancer there. Has anyone heard of this before? Maybe not in Fiji, but they have this tube and with a scope, and they look at your whole body through the scope, and they see, oh, is there any cancer growing? Like that every year. Big disease. People eat meat. Here in Fiji, you probably don't do the test, but you probably have a lot of people dying from cancer. especially the meat eaters. So the body's not meant for eating meat. It's just not meant. The strength of the stomach acid, your teeth. You don't have big fangs. Most people I know don't have big fangs in their mouth. So you just don't have the teeth for eating meat. That's why so many people have problems with the dentist because they're eating meat. Prabhupada talked about that. And so Fiji is one of the primary sources, places they go to for dentistry, right? Some of the best dentists in the world. Because people eat so much meat. So anyway, so Garuda is allowed to eat meat. And actually in the Mahabharata, there's the story that he's even allowed to eat lower class human beings. So that's why you should become a good devotee. You may become Garuda Prasad one day. There's that story. He asked his father, Kashyapa Muni, what kind of food can I eat? He said, you can eat everything except for Brahman. So one day he went to this village of Nishadas, lower class people. And he opened his mouth and started eating everybody. And cannibal. So he can eat anything. So anyway, and so what happened is as he was eating all the Nishada people, he felt a burning sensation in his throat. He said, what's the problem? Can't digest this person. Happened to be a Brahmin who married a Nishada lady. So he said to him, get out, leave my mouth immediately, and take your wife with you. So many stories about Garuda, you can eat anything except for Brahmins. So that's why we should take up Krishna consciousness very seriously, become a Brahmin, and then you're free from problems. So anyway, so he was Garuda, eat fish, and even where he was before, he was eating other snakes, even though he's a snake. He's a naga, not exactly a snake, but a naga, a very powerful naga. Actually, Ananta Shesha is also a naga, which is interesting. There's some good nagas and some bad nagas. But Suki, he's a good naga. Ananta Shesha is a good naga. Garuda is a good naga. But they eat things, what can you do? Just like if you go to Australia, they have these snakes that can eat people. They're called boa constrictors. You heard of them before? Big snakes. I was at the temple one time at New Govardhan and in Australia, and there was a big snake about this fat lying right on the road in front of me. And I said, I don't want to be your dinner. I just avoid it. It's true. They actually eat people. Usually pigs, they eat, pigs and not people so much. But they wrap around, you know what a constrictor is? Boa constrictor. They wrap around people and choke them and then eat them. And their mouth is so big. Their jaws, like most snakes, the jaws can actually separate from the hinge there, and they can make the big mouth even bigger to eat everything. So Garuda was eating snakes, and Garuda was also eating snakes, and Kali was eating snakes. Kali is eating snakes, Garuda is eating snakes. So there's some competition. And Kali ate some of the snakes that were meant for Garuda. Garuda got angry at them. So Garuda comes to this particular spot. So getting back to Shobhari Muni, he was a great sage. And Garuda one day came to the Kaliya state, Kaliya Lake. Oh, what's it called? Kaliya Lake. It was called, it's a lake in the Yamuna, where Shobhari Muni was. And Garuda started to eat the fish. And Shobhari Muni, he thought, why is Garuda eating my friends? So he cursed Garuda, as was mentioned in the previous verse. He cursed Garuda, you cannot come here again. If you come here again, you'll die. Of course, Garuda at the same time could have counteracted that curse. Like Parikshit Maharaj could have counteracted the curse of Shringi very easily. but he decided not to. He thought this is the Lord's plan. This is also a very interesting point, that when a devotee gets cursed, he doesn't counter curse. He accepts it as the Lord's plan. Like when Narada Muni got cursed by Daksha, he didn't counter curse or try to negate the curse. Daksha cursed him not to remain in one place for very long, and Narada Muni thought, oh, that's pretty good. Now I can travel and preach. So he just took it as, and Lord Chaitanya got cursed to be kicked out of his house. And he thought, that's nice, I can take sannyas. So a devotee doesn't counteract curses. He just accepts it as Krishna. He sees Krishna everywhere. Yomam pashyati sarvatra. Sarvam chamaya pashyati tashaham na pranashami sacha me na pranashati. He sees Krishna everywhere and everything. And he's never lost to Krishna, according to, that's a verse in the Gita at 6:30. So, getting back to the point, so Garuda, he stayed away from the Yamuna River. But because he was a great devotee, then it was a aparada, Vaishnava aparada. So what happens when you commit a Vaishnava aparada is that all your good fortune is finished. Everything's finished. Material good fortune, spiritual good fortune. You lose your taste for hearing and chanting. We see that sometimes someone commits an offense to other devotees and they can't chant anymore and they fall down from devotional service and they become bewildered. So it's very, very dangerous. So instead of committing offenses to Vaishnavas, we often say this at the time of initiation, that one should serve the Vaishnavas, right? So you do the positive instead of the negative. You actually serve the Vaishnavas. So Shobhani Muni committed a mad elephant offense, or mad Garuda offense, as the case may be, and his material desires started to increase. Already he had material desires, because getting sentimental with fish is a material desire, which is also interesting because even if you're on a high level of devotional service, if you're not attentive, you can commit offenses or develop material desires. So one has to be very, even if you're very advanced devotee, not a pure devotee, but even if you're on the platform of Bhava. So what happened is that Shobhani Muni started to get a little lusty. And one of the reasons he started to get lusty, he was looking at fish having their relationships with each other. Now, it's hard to, from my perspective, to understand how someone could experience less by seeing two fish have fish babies. Isn't it? I mean, it's just like, what? What's so attractive about that? You know, it's just like fish. So, and also another description probably gave the fish rubbed by him, rubbed his body, and he just experienced agitation. And so he thought, I'm meditating here in the water, but I'm spoiling my human form of life. I could be married and happy. I mean, nothing wrong with being married, but he was already renounced. It's like someone who's a sannyasi who wants to get married. Prabhupada said, or not just Prabhupada, the acharyas say it's fatangsi. It's like eating your own vomit. You know, it's just like, it's disgraceful. It's actually disgraceful. And so what happened is that he thought, well, I should get married. I'm in the wrong order of life. Maybe I should become a grahasta. So he was in the water. He dove out of the water. Most people dive into the water. He dove out of the water. You know, I used to dive into the water, not out of the water. Out of the water, usually climb up, but he came out like a water spout. And then he thought, you know, got to find some nice girl to get married to. But Prabhupada described he looked pretty ugly because he'd been in the water so long. I don't know if you've ever been in water for a long period of time. Most of you don't know how to swim, so it's not a problem. Fiji, practically no one learns how to swim amongst the Indian community because they're afraid, the mother's afraid they're going to drown. And because they don't learn how to swim, later on they drown. It's a really crazy superstition. You know, so when I've gone with the drugs Pacific Harbor, they go up to their ankles and they start to get scared, isn't it? I see that. I said, come on, let's go swimming. Actually, the best swimmer here was Vasudev. He used to swim for a long period of time each day. First came here, he went swimming. I went swimming with him. So anyway, so he jumped out of the water and he looked pretty ugly because he'd been in the water, as I mentioned before, a long time. Your skin gets really wrinkled, even if you're young. It looks, you look basically like a prune after being in the water for a long time. And he had all the seaweed around him too, seaweed, all the seaweed around him. So, who's going to marry him, other than a fish? Couldn't get married to a fish. So anyway, so he went to the king Mandata, and he said to the king, you have all these beautiful daughters. Can I have one to marry? And so the king looked at him and thought, I'm not going to do that to any of my daughters. And so what happened is he said, but he couldn't say no to a sage because that's offensive. So he says, you could marry any of them that want you. And he said, nobody's going to want this guy. It's a trick. So Shobhari Muni understood. He still had his mystic powers. So he turned himself into a beautiful, attractive, handsome young man. And then he went to where the girl's ashram was. 50 daughters this king had. And so he says to the girls, if anyone wants me. And the girls looked at him and they thought, wow, he's so handsome. It's interesting, people sometimes get married for the wrong reason just because the other person looks good. I mean, Ravana was quite attractive. It's described that even when he kidnapped the girls and he understood that he couldn't force any of them because he had been cursed, the girls voluntarily accepted him because they were happy to give up their regular husbands. Just like any of you ladies, if Ravana King is the richest guy in the universe, basically. Yeah. Very handsome, powerful. You can have your own airplane. You would give up your husband's like flushing the toilet, basically. Isn't it? I mean, imagine that. Just wow. Had to give this ugly guy, and this handsome guy's come. So people think like that, they become attracted to people just because of the way they look. And it's just like the wrong reason. Just like your Bollywood stars, actors and actresses, they tend to be the least religious people. Even in America, the actors and actresses are probably some of the most degraded people on the earth because they have one marriage after another after another. It's just like, what? And then people are just worshiping them, taking intoxication, everything. Other people just, if they see them, they just go crazy. They ask for their autograph, or they bow down to them. And anyway, so the girls saw his physical beauty and they started to fight with each other over it. They said, he's mine, he's mine, he's mine, he's mine. Give him to me. So he was thinking, this is great. I'm so happy now. Previously, he was happy in the Yamuna, being absorbed in meditation. But now, his material desires had come to the point where he thought he could become happy by marrying 50 girls. Because I was just reading the story about Chitraketu, where he married 10 million girls. Shoo. That's a lot more. That's several times the population of Fiji. I guess it's better than becoming the prime minister. You know, prime minister, you're only prime minister over what, 900,000 people. So he was the prime husband over 10 million. So anyway, so the girls started fighting, and he said to them, I can marry all of you, because he was a yogi. And so he used his yogic powers for the wrong purpose. He divided himself up, and each of the girls had their own Shobhari Muni. But the problem with yogic expansions, but not like Krishna's expansions, when Krishna married 16,108 girls, each and every one had something different going on in their houses. He was doing one thing. When Narada Muni went to Dwarka, he went to each and every house and saw something different going on, right? And so it was like amazing for Narada Muni. But with the yogis, when they expand themselves, it's like a television expansion, probably. So the girls really more or less had the same relationship. So anyway, so he spent, to make a long story short, he spent many years trying to enjoy himself. Ultimately, the effects of his offense wore off. Now, that takes many lifetimes for an offense to wear off, especially a great, you sort of lose your Krishna consciousness, and even you can't associate with devotees anymore. You know, Krishna keeps you from associating with devotees because you're an offensive person. And you see, nowadays, utilizing the internet, there's so much Vaishnava aparadha going on. You know, for those of you who are addicted to watching things or looking at different comments on the internet, you'll see that the way the internet interactions are arranged or they manifest is that someone will say something and someone will respond, and after 3 or 4 comments, they're criticizing each other and calling each other names. So people usually, and you know, Vaishnavas are using the internet to criticize other Vaishnavas. Now, if we want to say something to help a Vaishnava, that's very nice. Then we approach them in confidence. Guyamakyati, pruchati. We talked about this yesterday. We approach them in confidence and say, Prabhu, you know, can I help you? I have noticed this. But instead, we go on the internet and we just like all sorts of nasty things publicly about another Vaishnava. Terrible, isn't it? So then people lose their taste for your new chanting, and they become like Shobhari Muni. They just become immersed in material affairs. So Shobhari Muni, he realized this after many, I think it was thousands of years, with the 50 wives. And he said to the wives, you know, we're really wasting our human form life. And the wives, interestingly enough, they agreed with him. It's interesting because they were intelligent ladies. And basically they all took vanaprastha. And the story ends nicely because they all become great spiritualists at the end. But it took a long time. So basically this is the story of Shobhari Muni and the reason why Garuda couldn't go to the Kaliya Lake, and why Shobhari Muni fell down from Krishna consciousness because of his great offenses. Anyway, so this is some of the backstory. Interesting story. And it's interesting you had me read this verse, and we're in Fiji where Kali is supposed to reside, right? You're on this portion of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So any questions or comments about anything I said? Questions? Comments? Arguments? Yes. Oh, it's just your phone. Yeah. Yeah. The worst offense. If you come here, you'll die. That's what Prabhupada said in Krishna. The Guru comes to you, and Guru just naturally respected. That's a very interesting point about respecting people who, not criticizing people who criticize you, and even respecting it, seeing Krishna behind it if someone curses you. You know, another story is the story of Chitraketu, who was cursed by Parvati. It's such an interesting story. And Chitraketu, and of course, he said something a little critical about Lord Shiva. He said, Lord Shiva, you know, you're sitting there with all the sages and you have Parvati on your lap. It's not really appropriate. So Parvati, Durga, she cursed him that you were acting like a demon, become a demon. And what did he do? He just bowed down at her feet and begged for forgiveness, but he said, don't get rid of the curse. The curse is Krishna's plan. Interesting. The curse is Krishna's plan. And she cursed him that, and so he was a Vaishnava demon. Vritrasura, that's a story in Bhagavatam. He's Vritrasura. And he became a demon, harassed the demigods, but he was always preaching Krishna consciousness at the same time. And then finally Indra was called to fight with him. And he actually defeated Indra. Indra had to get a thunderbolt made of the sage Dadichi's bones. Dadichi was a great sage, and he was so surrendered that he agreed to die and give his bones. Because his bones were very powerful. He'd been previously chanting the Rayana Kavacha prayers. And so Dadichi gave his bones up. Indra had this thunderbolt, but still he got defeated by this demon. The demon swallowed him. And the demon Vritrasura was a devotee. The demon was preaching to Indra, who's supposed to be a devotee, but he's a Sakama devotee, a devotee with material desires. So then, how'd it go? So then the demons, Vritrasura, swallowed Indra. Interesting. And then Indra cut his way out with this thunderbolt and then took a year to cut off the demon's head, Vritrasura's head. But the point is that Vritrasura was previously this king Chitraketu, who just made a similar by his travel all the time. So it's another I have the curse. So which is good. I don't mind. It's kind of fun. Yes. Vamadev, your question.
Yeah, you were saying like the universe is pretty underrated. So this one attraction was saying the fish so we were attracted. But is that some so that and the other point was that it's relating to the ladies who was when you got married with those.
Yeah.
So there must be some correction of the past karma that sometimes we lose that those such a meditation, such a big sort of
Yeah.
So there must be some past karma, and that ladies that they progress in this guy so that he was out due to his past karma or something, and then we also bless those ladies by getting married and make them spiritually.
That's an interesting question. Well, a devotee, note or something like that. Oh, these are the initials. More karma. So you don't have past karma. I'm looking at my future karma right here. So anyway, the interesting thing is that it's not karma, it's his desire. It's called inattention while chanting or inattention while performing devotional service. Because obviously he was in the Yamuna. Yamuna is a sacred place. What happens when you bathe in the Ganges? I mean, even if he wasn't chanting Hare Krishna, what happens when you bathe in the Ganges? Anyone know? All the karma becomes eradicated. Yamuna is considered more sacred than the Ganges. Does everybody know that? That's mentioned in the Mahabharata and some other literatures. Because the Yamuna goes through Vrindavan, the Ganges doesn't go through Vrindavan. And Vrindavan is always a holy place. Even before Krishna appeared, Vrindavan is like Krishna's abode. And if Krishna's not there externally, he's there aprakata, he's his unmanifest form. So that's his internal abode. It's like the embassy of the spiritual world, in one sense. It's manifest within this material world. So he was in Braj. And in Braj, it's described, even if you go to sleep, it's like offering obeisances. That's the blessing, isn't it? You go to sleep. So you can sleep your way back to Godhead and Vrindavan. Of course, if you make offenses, they're more serious, much more serious in Braj. But anything, just breathing the air in Braj is so there's no karma. There's no karma in Braj at all. Zero. And what to speak if he was chanting the Lord's holy names, which is not mentioned what he was doing, but still he was in Braj. And so because he had no karma, it was a question of him being inattentive and him being fully responsible. Because one sense, we can say, I was forced to do it by my karma. You know, this is an excuse that we have sometimes. Of course, in Christianity, they say the devil made me do it. You ever hear that from Christian people? The devil made me do it. So we also, Krishna conscious, we say, Maya made me do it. Actually, we have a personal responsibility. If we do something, if our material desires overcome us and we're not attentive, just like Bart Maharaj, it was karma. He was on the platform of Baba, but he was inattentive, like inattentive chanting, inattentive devotional service. Prabhupada said, he used the example of a razor's edge. He said, devotional service is like a razor's edge. If you're not attentive, it can cut you, like the old razors. For those of you who are not that old, they used to have razors that were just like blades, big blades. Anyone seen that? Especially in the barber shop, they had that. And it's so big, if the barber makes a mistake, you lose your ear. When I went to India, they were using it. And I said, you're not cutting my hair. Because quite dangerous. And then in India, of course, they use the same blade for everybody without disinfecting it between people. A little dangerous. So, so basically, it's inattention, and we're responsible for whatever we do. So Shobri Muni, he just forgot that, you know, there's a sentimentality to be attached to fish. I mean, for children, it's all right to be a little sentimental. You know, they can become attached to the dog and everything like that. But for adults, I mean, we should love the animals. Just like in our temple, we have a cat, and I love it, but I don't kiss it. I love it, but I'm not attached to it. We can love everybody. Yes, to sarvani bhutani atmane manupashati sarva bhuteshu chatmanam. But we don't become. What does attachment mean? Okay, let me explain this. We're trying to enjoy the relationship. That's attachment. Just like if you have a cat, you like the cat because it feels good, right? Anyone here has ever had a cat? That same cat, and you shave off all of his hair, you will not love him so much anymore, will you? Then he looks like a big rat. You're not interested in him. Anyway, love cat's welfare, the husband's welfare, wife's welfare, children's welfare. We're not thinking of what they can do for us, we're thinking of what we can do for them. That's love. That's love for Krishna and love for other living entities. Okay, on that happy note, don't become attached. Become attached to Krishna and think of what you can do for Krishna. Jai, Jai.